I want to make sure that all commissioners have an agenda and materials for today's meeting. I will say that we are being recorded and are live streamed on the YouTube channel. So welcome to any guests or listeners who may be attending this meeting along with us. We are going to start with some introductions of both the commission members and then legislative staff and Department of Labor staff, and then proceed through the agenda. I will say again that I do not believe that we'll be meeting for a full hour and a half today. I think that a goal would be to end by noon, given the agenda. So we'll start with introductions and welcome. And Vice Chief Newell and Professor Medford, James, Joby, and Garrett, if you all could introduce yourselves.
Yes, good morning. Darrell Newell, I'm Vice Chief of the Passamaquoddy at Indian Township.
Good morning. My name is Garrett Stewart. I represent the labor rights.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcel Medford. I'm a professor of sociology and Africana at Bates College, and here representing an academic who specializes in race and ethnicity.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Mile. I'm a policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy, and I'm representing an organization with economic policy experience.
Hi everyone, I'm Joby Thoilo. I'm a senior policy advocate with Maine Equal Justice, and I am representing a statewide organization with policy expertise in public assistance.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Reed. I'm a student at University of Maine at Farmington, and I'm representing youth population on this mission.
And Bruce.
Bruce King. I do workforce development in Lewiston, second generation Mexican American, formerly incarcerated, representing impacted member of impacted community.
Thank you. Not seeing any other commissioners, I'd like for the legislative staff to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Walsh. I'm the communications director in the House Majority Office.
Good morning. My name is Reggie Parson. I'm a legislative aide and policy analyst in the Speaker's office.
And Cheryl Davis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Davis, Labor Program Specialist, State Workforce Board, Maine Department of Labor, and I'm administrative support for this commission.
Thank you all. I do see and welcome two more commissioners, Reverend Lewis and Ian, if you would take a moment to introduce yourselves.
Thank you. Reverend Kenneth Lewis. I serve on the commission as a faith-based representative. Good to be here this morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Yaffe. I serve on the commission as a representative of an organization working with immigrant communities and mano a mano.
So thank you all. As other commissioners may join, we will take a moment and pause to introduce them as well. Seeing no others, we will move on to the agenda, and I'll ask for any corrections or revisions that anyone would like to make this morning. Seeing none, we'll move right into our meeting, and we have, we'll hear from Katie. I believe Katie Walsh will lead us in a discussion about our final report and the press conference that is taking place in less than a week and what our communications and rollout will look like for the report. Thank you, Katie.
Yes, thank you. So thank you to everybody for all of the feedback and great conversations last few meetings. Joby, Isaiah, and myself were able to take all of that and implement the changes. So the content of the report is now finalized. I'm now going through a very thorough copy edit and formatting process to make sure it is a really strong final professional document when we release it on Monday. So feeling really good about the timeline there. As I mentioned to you all over email, the plan is to have a in-person outdoor press conference Monday at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m. for any commission members who are interested in being there. We'll be socially distant. We'll be wearing masks. We'll only be inviting commission members and the press to try to keep sizing small and adhere to all our public health guidelines. So if you haven't let me know if you'll be able to attend that yet, please just send me an email and let me know if you'll be there, and then we'll put together a final speaker lineup and I'll connect with anybody that's speaking as well. Before the end of this week, I will make sure you all get an email with a copy of the final report and with some, graphics and other communications materials, including an embargoed copy of the press release so that you have that in advance. And if there's any way you or your organizations want to build on that Monday, you'll have it by this week so that you can, add and adjust anything that you need to for your purposes. And then hopefully at 11 a.m. Monday, we'll have everything ready to go. Cheryl is going to help me get it up on the web. So there'll also be a live link for the public to access. I think those are all the kind of major points I wanted to cover. Are there any questions about the rollouts or things that I can answer? Great.
Thank you, Katie. I do have just one or two, and that is, first a statement, and that is that I hope that as many commissioners can be there as possible. We have checked with the state, and you will be reimbursed for any expenses, including mileage, in order to get and attend the press conference. So if that was a challenge, or if that's a question that you had, just get in touch with me afterwards, and we can make sure that you get hooked up with that to receive that reimbursement. The other is just about since we have not really had a strategic or organizational development discussion, Katie, I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about protocols as it relates to once a document is released by the commission, the use of that document for individual purposes or organizational purposes moving forward.
Do you mean any rules or guidelines around the use because of copyright? There, to my knowledge, that we don't really have any rules or guidelines. Since this is a product of the Permanent Commission, not necessarily of the legislature, it was written by and for this group. So all of you as commission members certainly have the rights to point to it, to share it, and to utilize it in any way you like.
Thank you. I just wanted commissioners to be comfortable in using the document for purposes of, moving forward. It is a document that you have full use of, full rights to use. So no need to check back in on that. It would be helpful to know the many ways in which it might be used so that we can document that. But I want folks to feel free to be able to use the document as they see fit. Any other questions? I guess I would ask Joby and Isaiah if they wanted to comment on the final report and the content, anything at all that you.
I did have one question before the comment, if I could.
Sure.
So our governmental distribution, what is our
plan for that?
What's our governmental distribution process? Who's going to get it? What department heads? What that kind of thing.
Yes. So since we are billing this as a report to the legislature Monday morning prior to the press conference, each leader, each Senate and House of Representatives leader will receive a hard copy, and then an email will go out to the rest of the legislature from Rachel and Craig with a digital link to the full report.
And Katie, thank you for the question, Reverend Lewis. because the Permanent Commission advises 3 branches of government. Reverend Lewis, were you thinking about that?
I was thinking about that, should our distribution, although this report focuses on legislative activity, we send our report to whomever we want to, I would imagine, and whether or not there are other parts of the governmental structure we want to send the report to, deliberately send it to.
Yeah, I'm open. I certainly am happy to share it with anyone you want. I've been in contact with the governor's office about the fact that this is coming out, so I'd certainly be sending this to them, at least through the press release. But if you want me to particularly request that it be shared with department heads or shared with the judicial branch in any way, that's an easy add-on.
So, I mean, so I would think that, I don't know how the governor's office is going to would distribute it, or if the governor's office would distribute it, but I think that commissioners and the governor's office, of course, and maybe the head of the court system, I mean, there are a lot, I think we should distribute it as broadly as we can, conceivably distribute it. And so that would be my only suggestion, that we would not limit our distribution to just the legislature.
So how do others feel about that? I think that's a great point, Reverend Lewis, and can put a cover letter, to the report and indicate as a courtesy, we thought that you might like this information, and certainly with the executive branch and the judicial branch, we can also say in our role as advisory, restate our mission. It may make sense, given that this report focuses on bills before the 129th, to send a copy, Katie, to each committee chair, particularly since our 26 bills fall within multiple committees of the 129th. So that may be something we could do as well. Any other comments on that? Thank you, Reverend Lewis. Before we get to Joby and Isaiah, so anything you'd like to offer at this time around the report and the content, the writing, anything at all?
Actually, I had a logistical question, which is there a plan for if it's raining? I just looked at the forecast. It looks like it's cloudy. It's kind of rainy today, so.
I had checked yesterday and it told me only a 20% chance of rain. So I was hoping that would hold up. But that is a fair question. I think that unless it is a rather heavy rain, we'd probably try to stick it out. But I will keep an eye on the weather and think about if we need a backup plan, and also see what numbers we're at. Because if we are at small enough numbers, we could potentially find a large enough indoor backup. But let me think a little bit more on that. I don't have a backup plan sorted out just yet.
My only comment on the writing is repeating what Katie said. Thanks everyone for the great discussion we had these last couple of months, but especially in the end there, while we were trying to wrap things up, and all the input we got over email as well. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Katie, who really pulled it together in the end, definitely did the lion's share of the work, and is continuing to do that as we move into the press part of it.
Thank you, Joby. Really grateful for all of you also did some heavy lifting. So thank you for all of that, and to Isaiah and Garrett and the whole team. It's been a real pleasure for me to work with you all on this, and excited to see it be in the world next week.
Isaiah, just wanted to give you a chance to make any comments on the report and to acknowledge all the heavy lifting that you did.
I don't think I have anything else to add, but I also echo everyone else's sentiments on the amazing work. Katie and especially Katie and Joby put into this report.
Great. So it's 11:21. We will move. We can move on. If those who would like the opportunity to speak during the press conference, all are welcome. Just please kindly let Katie know of your interest, and we can work on some remarks or help shape whatever it is that you'd like to say. You can also obviously write your own remarks, and we welcome whomever would like to participate in that press conference. So all are welcome. And thank you, Katie. I know that you are going to jump off now, and we all just want to continue to say and express our appreciation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
We are going to turn our attention now to the organizational development of our work. And as you can see on the agenda, we can have a kind of a discussion that goes in and out of all of these things. As you know, the next iteration of our work together will be on putting a strategic work plan together. It may or may not include some training. We may be able to do a strategic planning process while we launch a training schedule, and we certainly need to agree on a meeting schedule moving forward. I will start this section by talking about the Volunteers for America grant and the staff position that we were awarded through the Volunteers of America. Reverend Lewis, please feel free to chime in. I know you've been part of some of the communication with Volunteers of America. As you all know, we Volunteers of America applied for a one-time grant of about $50,000, and the grant for their purposes was to be used to hire a research analyst for the Permanent Commission. My understanding is it is a calendar year position. They have issued a job description of which I'm reviewing now. Reverend Lewis has access to a copy of it. I can send anyone, or I can send out a copy of the job description to all so you can look at it. They are hoping to be able to announce the award of the grant with the Permanent Commission in a press release the week of September 21st. So next week, we will go through the press conference for our report. 1 week later, Volunteers of America will release a report announcing the award. That will kick off a hiring process of which if you are interested in participating in thinking about that, please let me know. They will launch that the hiring process immediately, and they're looking for recommendations to specifically send the job announcement out to. They do not anticipate a long hiring process, and they'd like to be able to bring someone on board fairly soon. Reverend Lewis, do you have anything you'd like to add about this?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd like to add, Rachel, is I think it would be helpful for a few other the commissioners who deal with research and policy related work to review the job description to ensure that we're getting really what we want, what's needed. And so I don't know if there are individuals on the line, I'm sure there are, who operate in that space. If you can maybe put your hand up and say, yeah, I'll read through the job description before it's finalized. We want to make sure that I thought Joby would put his hand up, as I thought James would put his hand up, and our esteemed professor would put her hand up maybe to review. Thank you so much. I'm finished.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I will go ahead and I'll send it out to everyone just in case different folks pick up on different things, but it would be helpful for Joby, James, and Professor Medford to do a deep dive and send any comments back that you think makes sense. And I will say again that if any one of you would like to participate in the hiring process itself, please let me know because that is open to you as well. Bringing someone on board, we definitely need to have a strategic work plan in place. We need to have discussed reporting requirements. We need to discuss decision-making, but really the strategic planning plan allows us to articulate how we are going to engage and align with stakeholders, how we are actually going to build our capacity. The strategic plan articulates where we are currently, but it provides the roadmap to where we want to go. And so we could easily do 1,000 things. We could go in 1,000 different directions. But what we need to do is be very strategic about our capacity and make decisions as a whole. So it's a very, very important next step for this commission. As you all know, a strategic plan is not static. It is a document and a process that's alive, and change is inevitable. So I want to really get some discussion going about what it is that you would like to see in our strategic plan process. If you have any suggestions for those we could reach out to potentially consider as consultants and facilitators. And I'd also like to know timing. You know, strategic plan process could take a year. It can take 2 years. There are companies that take 3 years. There are folks who take 2 days, 6 months. It's all over the place. What we need is some consensus-driven direction immediately. So I'm interested in hearing from you about your time commitment. I think if we can isolate at least 2 half days fairly quickly within the next 30 to 45 days to get us started, that would be the optimum, given that the legislature goes back in January. And that is one of the branches of government that is time sensitive. It's not a year-round process. So if you will, help me, let's talk about a strategic plan and what that process might look like and feel comfortable for all of you.
Madam Chair, could I just ask one question
Please.
before? And the question really is around the state-generated budget and staff. Any sense of timeline as it relates to that role and responsibility and participation in a strategic plan? That's one of the questions I have I'm trying to imagine if we went forward quickly with the strategic plan and did not have the senior staff on board, the disadvantage that they might be in trying to implement the things that we're trying to do, because they would not be any party to any of the discussions or the process. So any sense of where we are, where we may be from the budget perspective within the DOL?
So thank you for the question, Ian. I'll open it up to you and see if you have any response for that, given what we've learned in dealing with the state and the biennial budget process.
Sure. Yeah, there's a budget template of roughly $400,000 that was submitted to DOL. I assume that it got approved. I never heard back that the commissioner signed off on it, and that's on the way to the governor's office now. And now eventually the governor will submit that budget to the legislator, and then the fun part starts around appropriations for, again, this is all for the permanent commission starting on July 1st, 2021. Anything between now and July, which is mostly, I think, what we're concerned about, would be paid for through the $50,000 that we've already received from the governor. Plus, there's been some grants that were made, and I don't know if we have an accounting of how much money. I don't think we've received a statement that says you have X amount of dollars that you can spend, but that money would be what we're spending between now and July, in addition to the money through the Volunteers of America, which I think they're not actually giving us money, they're going to be giving us staff. And then that essentially has nothing to do with the state from a hiring and perspective like that. So I guess The short version is that we probably still need to get a statement from Department of Labor about just how much money is available for us to spend. And what are we going to do for a staffing plan in this interim period before we get to quote unquote a fully funded commission next summer. And I just don't have any familiarity. There's a couple of like procedural things that have to happen with money. Like if the state receives a check for the permanent commission, there's two things that have to happen. They have to have received the money before we can spend it, and they have to like authorize the spending of the money. The authorization is merely a formality, but we both need money and authorization to spend it. I'm not sure of a situation where the authorization wouldn't be provided. That might be something, again, to follow up on with Department of Labor for, what things can we not spend money on if it's a donation.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And I would add, Reverend Lewis, that my short answer is we will not have senior staff on board because funding for that is embedded in the biennial budget.
Okay.
So right now we have about $54,000. There's always a $500 allotment that stays there permanently to keep the account open. But we have about $54,000 that we have been approved and it is authorized to spend right now. Actually paying for a facilitator for our strategic plan will come out of that money. But in terms of senior staff, we are not looking at that process until after the budget has been approved, and then it goes 2021 to 2023.
Okay. So then my one quick follow-up as it relates to the staffing support we've received thus far, what will be available for the rest of FY21?
Administrative support through Cheryl Davis, courtesy of the Department of Labor, and then the Volunteers of America staff person. Unless we decide to use some of our $54,000 to bring someone on in, I'm guessing, a part-time or hourly basis, we are without staffing, quote unquote, until that budget is approved.
Thank you.
So I appreciate the question, and I'll just again throw it out there and hoping that you all chime in a little bit about what this next phase of work should look like and how much time you think we should devote to it. If we could get to some decisions today around a direction for that in the next 20 or 25 minutes, that would be really helpful, because I'm sure that we certainly don't want to live with this question meeting after meeting. We need to move forward.
I have a little question of clarification. It sounds a little bit, when I say it, it almost sounds a little like I'm focusing on kind of how it's going to affect me. I know that, we're kind of at 2-year terms in terms of the commission or whatever. So I think for the sake of me understanding kind of what is the structure that I'm going to be working with in the coming years or in the coming months or whatever, how does that work? Is it 2 years and then we're out kind of thing, and then we're bringing in the new people? Is that how this is working in terms of nomination? Or sorry, I just want a little clarification around that.
No, that's a great question. The terms are 2 years, and they're calendar year based. So you have another full year being on the commission, and then you are reappointed by the appointing authority, of which some commissioners were appointed by the governor in the executive branch, and then others were through the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. those you can then be reappointed if you'd like, or you can go off the commission and we can, they would appoint others. There are no term limits. So conceivably, I mean, as an informal response, I would say, as long as your interest is still there and you are participating as an active member, it feels like the appointing authorities would reappoint those who want to stay involved in the work. But there are no term limits per se.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think one of the ways in which we may want to approach it, if I was to think a little bit more about what was embedded in Reverend Lewis's question, is for us to think about maybe having a interim plan until we can get senior staff and commission fully staffed, and our capacity to do things, it would be considerably different with staffing. I wonder if folks can give some thoughts to whether or not we should approach this as an interim strategic plan until we have a formal budget in which to operate.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But like you said, it is a living, it is a living document. So we can theoretically change it. However, the foundations are going to create that scaffolding. So it might be better to, once we have staff, to just wipe the slate clean and start over. That's just my gut reaction off the bat. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Another way to put it is, what would you all like to achieve? I mean, we in the next year, I mean, there are a lot of ideas that, I've put forward and we can put in an email to you about some thoughts, but
Madam Chair?
yes, Reverend Lewis, please.
I think that, and I'll make the distinction between a strategic plan and a work plan. And I think as we progress towards the end of FY21, and you say we operate kind of on a calendar year, not a fiscal year, right? From
This commission appointment, yes.
appointments. And if, funding is tied up into the biennial budget, it seems to me that we're about, we're pushing halfway through, or 3/4, not halfway through, but 1/4 into the fiscal year. We may be able to develop a work plan that takes us to the end of the budget cycle, that has some pretty strong deliverables, and then go into a strategic plan. I'm a little concerned about how a strategic plan can consume our time. There's a lot to it, and I think that the Permanent Commission, notwithstanding our appointments, the strategic plan should be pretty expansive. It should touch a lot of different areas. It probably should be multi-year, something that kind of guides the work for the next 3 to 5 years. And so I'm finding it difficult to imagine going to a significant strategic plan without staff. And notwithstanding Cheryl, of course, but I'm talking about folks who are totally dedicated to this kind of work. So I'm a little concerned about that.
I think that makes sense, what Reverend Lewis just said to me. I feel like it accomplishes the goal of giving us direction in the short term, but not committing before we're fully staffed. And by the time we are fully staffed and we do want to engage in a deeper strategic plan, I think a lot of us will have a much better sense of what we want to accomplish as a commission. I think we're all still pretty new and figuring it out.
What do others think? A work plan now, I think it's a suggestion that we could devote a couple of half-day meetings towards. to get us through to when a budget is approved. It would certainly help with fund development, and it certainly would help with decision making. One of the things, because we advise 3 branches of government, we have interacted with one, which is the legislative branch, which also changes over every 2 years. But we've yet to formally interact with the judiciary branch or the executive branch. And so having a work plan may allow us to think about just what that initial interaction with those branches of government may look like in our roles.
Yeah, I would definitely add, right, as a newer commission member, sort of operating with a working plan to sort of get a sense, right, of what kind of long-term, short-term strategic goals might be, would be incredibly useful, right? Because I am definitely concerned about putting in this much labor early on for just sort of this very short period of time, and then also maybe selling ourselves short in what we're, what we actually have the capacity to sort of really do when we're sort of fully staffed and operating with a full budget and all of those resources. So I definitely agree with moving forward with a working plan and then developing a strategic plan for 2021.
Thank you, Marcel. So not anyone else? Otherwise, it looks like, yeah, Ian?
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it would be helpful for us to sort of paint a picture of what we're trying to accomplish before, in this, like, if we think about the next year as like an interim year of the commission, what are our goals between now and June, coupled with what are the building blocks of a longer term strategic plan. And, I know for government, probably at this point, strategic plan for 1 year in advance would be nice. But having those pieces laid out of, you could think of it as we're really just doing 2 strategic plans, or we're doing a work plan and then a longer term strategic plan with a 3-year work plan that'll be attached to that. But it'd be helpful to get a sense of timing, especially from your perspective around the engagement process with the different branches of government over this year, and just saying, okay, we know a new legislator is coming in January, so that timeline is set. But what do we want to do for the judiciary? How do we want to build those introductions and relationships as we think about what do we need to do to build up to the staff level, and to essentially, I'm assuming, at some point, somebody is going to ask us, like, well, what do you want $450,000 for? Like, what are you going to do with $450,000? I don't think that there's probably not an easier time for that money to be given without questions asked than right now. But I'm guessing that it's still going to ultimately become a fight in the budget environment that the legislator is likely going to be in next year. And we should be prepared to, not to justify the use of funds, but to assert, this is what our long-term vision is for the commission, and this is why we need this structure, and these are the types of things that we're going to be doing. And having a work plan, or having at least a work plan for this year, I think would be a helpful document to help people wrap their heads around what the commission's all about without having to always sit down with them to explain it.
Well, thank you, Ian. I love the idea of our work plan and then a strategic planning process that we build towards. One of the things I'm really concerned about is, and the work plan helps resolve it, is the fact that we're going through, one of the worst crises that we've known as a country and as a world. And there's some unfinished work that we have all kind of danced around leading as we were going through the legislative process, but that are emergency, that are urgent needs because we're in a pandemic. And I would hate to see us not be able to respond to things like the governor's economic recovery, committee and their recommendations, and the long-term impact on our economy and how that impacts the racial, indigenous, and tribal populations of this state. There's an immediate need for our voice to be heard, and to be, for us to be responsible to the stakeholders and communities that we best represent. So I love the idea of a work plan because it feels more immediate to me, that we can get that clearly get some direction around where our focus should be immediately, because people are living their lives through a pandemic, and the ongoing struggles around tribal sovereignty and systemic racism. That's an everyday experience for people. So I love the idea, Reverend Lewis, of a work plan, because it sounds to me more of an immediate
Right.
response that we are accountable to. We are absolutely accountable to.
And
And
Madam
it
Chair,
leads into
yeah.
a longer term, thoughtful analysis and assessment about the long-term vision and deliverables. Reverend Lewis?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I, what comes to my mind is this opportunity to advance both the lived experience and the learned experiences. There's a lot of data and information that we need to learn. There's a lot of resources that we need to take in to help inform our work. That's not just found in Maine, but there are strategies and implementations that are outside the state that we also should learn about. So whatever our work plan includes, and this is not work planning time, of course, I think the opportunity to learn about some of the things that are happening that might have import here in Maine. And so whether it's legislative related work, justice, or executive branch related things, or what have you. You and I have had some conversations about the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and a lot of the things that happen there. And I still think for those of us who represent constituencies, the opportunity to engage those constituencies too, and to bring that broader sense of need back to the commission. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about this. I think I'll call it action plan, work plan, it's action oriented. And I think that's what's needful right now for us.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
I guess building off of that, I agree that something action is needed. I think a work plan, especially as you mentioned, in a moment like this where so much is happening, and it's just a time to do things. And I also, I guess I can speak to like what I would like to see be achieved, I guess. The commission is, as Reverend Lewis mentioned, collecting that data that we don't have, and we often found ourselves, and I know some of that will come with getting staff, but we found ourselves struggling to get when we were discussing bills, which is especially the lived experience. And I remember when we first talked on the phone, President Talbot Ross, about having hearings or meeting with people in each county, and or having some sort of form that we'd be able to get more lived experience and more exposure to the struggles of people around the state, some that we may not be aware of because each of us are only a single representative of a much larger group of people. I think that's what I would, in the near future, like to see is getting more of that lived experience data for us that we can write down and turn to and see what is the next thing we should tackle.
Well, thank you all. It sounds to me like we can make a decision and regarding our next steps. And so I know we go in and out of Robert's rules, so I apologize about that. But if we could just formally adopt this as a next step for our work, that would be great. So if we could get a motion to,
Madam Chair,
yes,
I would move that the commission would engage in the development of a work plan for to incorporate our work through the fiscal year. I don't know if that's germane, but that's what I'm asking, that we would start the work of the development of a work plan that would govern our activities through June 30, 2021.
I
Is there-
apologize if I went off track.
no apologies. No apologies at all. No. May I, any second to that motion? Thank you,
I'll
Bruce.
second.
Thank you, Chief. So it's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll just ask for all those in favor of moving forward with this work plan immediately, just to raise your hand. And I'm seeing, let the record reflect that that was a unanimous vote. Although I don't see James in his window, we'll make sure to log his vote as soon as he returns. So now that we have moved forward with a work plan, if there was a formation of a very small work plan, action plan team that I could work with, that would be great, so that we continually move this forward. Are there just a couple of folks who would lend some assistance to putting together the details of this process? And I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was saying I'd be interested in being involved in that.
Thank you.
I'm interested. I tend to overcommit, so I guess I would like to see what that looks like before I sign up for something that I don't have time to do. But
Sure. I think all it means right now is a 1-hour meeting scheduled mid next week.
Madam Chair,
I'm
I'd be interested, but I just have so much going on right now. But I mean, if it's only an hour, I can, help out.
Thank you, Garrett. And it's
Madam
really,
Chair, I can't do a midweek meeting. I'm sorry. I want to participate, but next week I'm unavailable both Wednesday and Thursday. If we can find another, all day I'm booked. We can find another time. I'd love to participate in the development of an action plan or work plan, but we've got to find a date on which we can gather.
okay, absolutely. So we can leave the date open for right now, but it would look like a 1-hour meeting just to touch base sometime next week. With that said, it would mean that the permanent commission would not meet as a commission for 2 weeks. So there would be no need for us to meet next week. And within 2 weeks, we would meet in order to move the work plan idea forward. And hopefully you will have something in the form of an email in which to base the discussions of the meeting on. Everyone okay with that as a direction? Great. The only other component of this, and it's 11:55, I did say we were going to try to end at noon. The only other component of that, and I'll weave that into the 1-hour discussion, is as it relates to our own, as in this team's learning process. And we have been committed since our inception to making sure that we continually educate ourselves and are open to information from multiple sources, so that we are growing as a team, both in our collective knowledge, but in our individual knowledge as well. So we're not taking anything for granted around the experiences of the populations in which we are charged with looking at their status. So we will weave into that 1 hour meeting some suggestions on how to move that learning component forward. And James, we just have to record for the record if you're in favor of the work plan, doing the plan now and strategic plan to come.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I had to step away. Yes.
No worries, no worries. So fall meeting schedule is the other thing on the agenda. I want to just pause for a second. I believe Joby had one other piece to add before we get to the meeting schedule about another time sensitive piece of work. Joby, take
Yeah,
it away.
I was just, can you all hear me? Okay. I was just flagging, in addition to things like responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee, similarly time sensitive is the opportunity for us as a commission to submit legislation. And the time to do that would be, so I think the legislature would begin in December, and generally bills need to be submitted by legislators a few weeks before they begin. And so I'm thinking late November, early December would be the ideal time, just so that it is considered at the same time as other bills as opposed to a late bill. I'm not sure if we can actually submit it after that, but if we can, that's always an option. But I think generally speaking, it's best to have it go in, and so that it is considered with the full slate of bills at the start of the session. And so that would be a fairly quick turnaround. We're looking at mid to late November, maybe early December.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Reverend Lewis.
I guess, and I appreciate that thought. I guess my primary question would be, is absence of a strategic plan, would we want to submit bills, or would we want to give our opinion on bills that are submitted during this kind of short time period between our work plan and the development of our strategic plan? That would be my only question about, from a time perspective, have we given significant thought from a strategic perspective as to legislation? So that would be my only question concerning that.
So two responses. One to Joby. I appreciate the nod towards submitting legislation. Just a point of clarification for commissioners: we are not held to the same time frame as legislators. So the permanent commission can submit a bill at any point in time in the legislative session. So just so that you get a sense of timing. Although I do agree with Joby that being able to submit legislation, if that's something we decide to do, that it doesn't have to be decided all at once, because we have the rolling opportunity to do so. But if there was something that we wanted to put forward, it would be best to do so within that particular time frame as the legislators are working on. So that's one point. The other is, Reverend Lewis, is we did develop recommendations, however, when we went before the Appropriations Committee. And so I agree with you around about thinking about legislative action, but I do think there were recommendations that we put forward that could be used as the basis for a bill if we wanted to put forth legislation. And all of that was related to COVID and the need for investment and partnerships in the communities most impacted disproportionately. So while I agree with you that we need to spend some time really thinking about what a legislative agenda may be, including bills, sponsoring bills, there is already a document that we can refer back to that may be a roadmap into some possible legislation. It is
Madam Chair,
12:01.
just a quick question. Is that the June 30th document?
That is, yep, the
Okay.
June 30th document in which
Thank
we,
you.
yeah, and we can recirculate that to folks if they want it, just as a way for you to think about the meaning of legislation and what could possibly be submitted by the Permanent Commission as we move into the fall. So any other issues, anything folks want to add to this discussion?
I think I would just add, while we're on the topic, that we did go through this whole bill review process, and we made substantive policy recommendations at the end. I think it would be a logical conclusion for us to base a piece of legislation based on our conclusions that we came to in the report. I'm not saying that that's what I think we should do, but just throwing that out there as another option.
I guess I have a little clarification. Actually, you, Representative, you covered, a lot of my question that I put in the chat, but I'm just wondering, especially with COVID hitting, and there were a lot of bills, obviously, that we got to look through that came a little bit later. I guess I'm wondering, if we were to submit something later, does that drop it in the priorities in terms of what's being voted on? Like, is there a strategic advantage to getting something out as, in front of the 130th?
Well, I'm going to ask James to reply to that, just because I have my personal opinion, which I don't want, as a legislator, that I don't want to influence the commission. So I will yield. James?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have the be-all end-all answer, but my hunch would be that earlier would be better because there's more time for discussion and more time to sort of build public pressure around it. I think bills that get dropped in at the end of the session, like committees are just really, to my knowledge, committees seem to be really exhausted by that point and often don't give bills a very good hearing if they're right at the end. So my hunch would be that sooner is later. I mean, you can't always control like when the bills actually get heard. If it's, especially if it's a controversial bill that the legislature and the relevant committee is wary of taking up, they may push it all the way to the end anyway. But it at least gives us more time to sort of like push and publicly campaign and lobby for something if it's introduced earlier. My thought.
Anyone, those of you who work with the legislature, want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I would agree with what James just said. I think the only time I would assume that not doing it earlier is better is if there's a trade-off between, okay, we could do it earlier because that's better, but we're not actually ready. If taking some more time will put the bill in a much better place from a, I don't know, a substantive standpoint, or just lining up your ducks for whatever you feel like is needed to pass a bill like this, then you sort of judge that trade-off in that moment. Otherwise, generally speaking, all things being equal, I think for the reasons James said earlier.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Bruce. The only last question, I promise, that I have is around scheduling our next meeting, which ideally would be 2 weeks from today. Again, conceivably from 11 to 12:30, but more likely than not, just about an hour. Are there any objections to meeting on the 23rd of September, Wednesday at 11 a.m.? And we will continue this discussion. We'll bring back a set of recommendations for the Permanent Commission to vote on, so that we can get our work action plan process underway. Not seeing any objection. We will schedule our next meeting 2 weeks from today, work with a team that's been identified on our next steps with the action plan. And just think we should end, it's about 12:06, but I think we should end again with appreciations to the work that was done on our final report, particularly Garrett, Joby, and Isaiah. We want to truly thank you for the heavy lifting. I want to say hello to Brother Garrett and welcome him back. I know that you were gone for a couple of meetings, so it's great to see you back.
Yeah, I had a double knee replacement and I've had some problems with that. So it's hard for me to sit down. So, but I'm back. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments for folks before we adjourn? Seeing none, I'll just get a motion to adjourn. Early.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, a vote to adjourn, and I hope you all have a great 2 weeks. Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.